All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We're about 2 minutes in. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar titled Flexible Financing in Federal. Before we get started and introduce ourselves, I did just want to mention a few things. The first being all participants, you're muted, but we do have a chat box that's there. So please feel free to drop your questions into the chat. If we don't get to them all, there is a slide at the end that has our contact information, so you can reach out to us individually. Please feel free to do that. We love to talk about financing. And then also, this is the first of a 4-part series. And so what Tony and I have found with doing this for a long time is that when it comes to financing in federal, you've got people in all areas of the spectrum, right? Those that know a great deal about financing, and then you get some who don't know anything. And so the intention of this series is really to start a foundation, and then something to build upon. So I just want to set that expectation. Before we jump in, though, I do want to allow for us to introduce ourselves real quickly. I'm going to pass it over to Tony to provide a little bit of information about who she is, what she does, and a little bit about her experience.
Great. Thanks, Nikki. And thanks, everybody, for joining us this morning. I'm Tony Egan. I've been with FOR for about a year. I came over from KeyBank and couldn't be happier. There's a great team of people here that support us on the financing side of the house. My background is actually in commercial financing, but I've spent the majority of my time in the federal market space. So I've worked with, virtually all 3 branches of the federal government across a range of federal contracts. And I always tell people, there's not a class you can take or a book you can read that gets you up to speed and gives you the expertise you need to work well in this space. It really is a situation where you just get in, roll your sleeves up, and you do some deals, and you renegotiate some contracts, and you reconcile some invoicing issues. It's really how you become an expert in the space. And the team and I here have been doing it long enough, and we're really excited to leverage our knowledge and experience to help you guys drive more business with your federal customers.
And I'm Nicole Newell. I'm a director of finance, sales, and operations here at FOR. I've been with the company for 9 years, but prior to, I was with Immix Group, whom a lot of you might be familiar. But back in the days when Immix Group managed GSA schedule contracts, and then later became a reseller, and then became a aggregator, and then a full-blown public sector IT distributor. And so through that evolution, I had a couple of different roles, but primarily working with OEMs, manufacturers, understanding their route to market, and then also working very closely with the channel, understanding where the channel could add value, understanding where different channel partners focused in terms of their area of expertise, and then try to marry up the two. And so when I came over to FOR Inc., Tony, would you mind jumping to the 3rd slide real quickly? When I want to make sure we've got our presentation up here for all of you to see. When I joined FOR Inc. Almost 10 years ago, we were doing financing. Our company was really born out of doing finance transactions. That was kind of the base set of what our skill set was. And then over time, when you're doing finance deals, the exciting thing about it is that financing is really a sales tool to make deals bigger, to accomplish government objectives of meeting, budget constraints and kind of meeting them where they are. And so through the evolution of our business and working through very large deals like this, we know a lot of folks in the industry. We've all been at this for a long time. And so when you look at the experience and the knowledge that we bring, a lot of folks just came to us and said, hey, what else can you do for us? Are there additional things that you can do? Well, lo and behold, we ended up getting contracts, and the evolution of our business over the last 10 years, we became a full-blown public sector IT distributor ourselves. And so that is what we do today. Tony, can you go to slide 4? There are a bunch of value-add services that we provide to the OEMs and the channel partners that we support. That's what we do. I mean, it's helping to accelerate sales, whether they're very far advanced in terms of their federal footprint and they've got a reoccurring revenue with government customers to those that are a little bit more in that mid-tier market. Maybe there's a handful of people that are focused on federal. We look to develop a customized solution that helps them accelerate sales. And so what does that look like? Well, the financing is a piece of that. In fact, I would say it's probably a differentiator in terms of what we do. But there's sales and operational support. There's partner and contract alignment that we do in terms of supporting our OEMs and making sure that they've got access to vehicles, and then also marketing and demand generation. But for the purposes of today's presentation, we're going to hone in on that financing piece. That is strictly where Tony and I and our team focuses. And so if we could jump into the next slide, Tony. I just wanted to put this up to establish a little bit of credibility in terms of some of the folks that we work with in the market. This is just a sampling of some of the manufacturers that we work with, and we've supported finance transactions, to some of the partners that we're aligned to be able to support these transactions, and then also government agencies. I would argue that we've worked with every government agency in the market. But when it comes to Intel or different programs, there might be a little bit where we may not have as far of a reach, but definitely have closed deals with every government agency. And then the contracts piece. I want to be very deliberate in how I explain this, because I don't want anyone to be intimidated by the fact that we have contracts, right? A lot of OEMs and how they go to market, they don't hold their own GSA schedule contracts, right? So by a natural design of helping to support their business, we have them on our GSA schedule contract. We add their products to SOUP, iTest software too, and there's a few other contracts that we hold. Also important, I think, to mention is that we have a TS clearance. So we've got an ability to pass top secret documentation, which is usually labeled the DD-254 docs, and being able to close and support those types of businesses and details. And so jumping to slide 6 here, Tony, really on the specifics, this is the nuts and bolts and nitty gritty of what we're going to talk about today in terms of the 4-part series.
Yeah, I just wanted to build upon something you were talking about earlier, in terms of why we set it up this way. I mean, historically, when we've done these webinars, what we were doing is really cramming in just a ton of information into a 60-minute session that just wasn't enough time. So the thought process here was that we break out this series in order to help you understand each step of the finance deal lifecycle, right? So today we're going to spend time talking about how you get comfortable with introduction and understanding this tool and how you can use it to your benefit. And then in the next session, we're going to move to sort of the RFI stage, if you will, where you're introducing the concept to your agency and how you do that and the things you need to set up and get in front of. And then the third piece of that, we're going to move into actual RFQ or the bidding process, right? So how do you provide a proposal? What are the steps you need to take to make sure that you're doing it properly and setting it up for success? And then the last session is going to be focused around bringing that all to closure once the award comes in, right? So what does the funding flow look like in the PO chain, and how does the award look, and what are the steps you need to take to make sure that we bring it full circle? So again, keep in mind, I've been doing this for a long time, and I learn something new on every deal I work on, and that's the truth. And our objective today is not to make you federal financing experts, but rather get you comfortable enough with the subject matter that you want to bring it into your sales cycle, and then confident enough in us that you're working with the right team of people who know how to talk the language and know how to help you bring these to closure. So with that in mind, we can jump right into it, unless there's any questions. Does anyone have any questions up till this point? Okay. So, obviously the first step in any sales process is to understand and identify who your customer is, right? And here we have the United States government, which procures over $100 billion worth of IT products and solutions annually. So deep pockets, big need, perfect customer, right? This should be easy. Well, we all know that that's the exact opposite, because what we have is an incredibly complicated end user and procurer of the solutions and the products that we're selling. And top of that list of complexity is the amount of regulation and compliance that these agencies have to live under, right? They have to follow the FAR, which is volumes and volumes of laws. They have mandates and directives that come down that are essential to meet, yet their budgets don't always follow in step with that. And it's a very long sales cycle, right? The average life cycle, I think, of a deal like this is 12 to 24 months, and that's a long time. And that's in part due to the levels of approvals that you have to get, right? Both on the technology side, you have to sell the technology to the folks who are actually going to be using it, and then you have the procurement side where you could have a contracting officer who's brand new and doesn't have the knowledge or the authority, so they have to go through several levels of approval, and legal may have to be pulled in, and it just adds extra time to a very already elongated time frame. And all of this is built around their appropriations, right? They don't know for sure what they're going to get. I mean, they can ask for what they need and budget out in future years what they're going to need, but there's no guarantee that they're going to get what they ask for, nor if they get it, if it's going to stay that way, right? We're living through, unprecedented times right now where there's so much uncertainty around budgets, and it's just it's another obstacle that our end user customer has to work around, that we have to try to find solutions for. And within all of that, they still have security and classified issues that they've got to make sure that they're procuring through the proper channels that way, and they're required to, as one of their mandates, push business through small business and socioeconomic set-asides, which you need to know when you're working with them so that you can funnel the sales process in the right direction. So with all of these complications and challenges that you face, they can't even leverage commercial practices that could make that process easier because of the way that their appropriations come down. So that's where financing can come in to help you with that. So FOR's suggestion for trying to circumvent some of these issues is to introduce the concept of a payment plan to your government customer. Now, we're going to go into a payment plan and what it looks like in great detail in our next session, but I think it's important to just sort of lay out the basic concept, which is, instead of having the government go in and tell you, hey, I only have X amount of dollars, what can I purchase with that this year towards the goal of, what I need to achieve? And flipping that conversation to you saying, tell me, agency, what you need in the time frame you need it, and let me help you not only provide the best solution, but also the way to obtain it FAR compliantly, right? So this structure allows the government to enter into a contract that has base plus option years. So as the money gets appropriated down to them, they're using it as it comes. They're not projecting or obligating any funds that haven't already been obligated to them, so they can get around that anti-deficiency act of not being able to enter into multi-year deals. So the way it works is they would leverage whatever funding was given to them in the current fiscal year to place that on the base year of the contract. And then as funds get pushed down in the following years, they would modify the contract to park the next 12 months of funding on there and continue to do that through the term of the contract. And all of this, which is most important to them, is FAR compliant and allows them to achieve everything they need now in order to and move forward with the procurement. So while it might seem obvious, the question that a lot of people ask us is like, look, there's a couple extra steps in financing, right? And it's complicated. And why should this matter to me? Why should I care? And the answer is, while there are some extra steps, it doesn't have to be complicated. And when you're working with the right team of people who do this day in and day out, it should go seamlessly, right? And as a result, if you can flip that conversation to de-scoping something to fit with a budget, you actually become a trusted advisor to your agency, and you're locking them in to that term of the contract, right? So if they enter into a base plus 2 contract, they're yours for 3 years, and you have all of that time to continue to integrate yourself into their business. And because you're that trusted advisor, you can work with them when the renewal time comes and accelerate additional business, right? So some of the other benefits of that are, on these these base plus option year structures, it puts a blueprint down. So if they want to add additional scope to the project that's allowed within the original contract, it's a simple modification to the existing already issued award, right? There's not a whole nother cycle that you have to go through to bid on that. So it makes add-ons and additions easier for you to achieve. And again, all of it aligns with whatever their budget patterns are, right? Like we can build cash flows and payment due dates around when they're going to get their money in the scope of how they're going to get their money. And ultimately that ends in, larger deals for you, more deals for you, potential increase in your margin. And it differentiates you from the people who are going into them and saying, how much money do you have? And what can we sell within those restrictions? So it is, when used properly, it's a very powerful tool to help you, gain customer share and, build up your pipeline.
And so when you think about financing, it doesn't apply to every deal. I want to make sure that we're very clear about that. Financing really makes sense, beyond the proof of concept, right? So we don't finance POCs, unfortunately, but where a customer does have some footprint with the technology or a similar technology, and they've tested it and it's proven successful, it develops an essential use story to it, right? There's an essential use case that we focus on as when we evaluate deals, is understanding how the customer is using that technology, and are they expanding their footprint? Are they reaching out to additional programs within the agency and more people coming online? And so once we get there and say, I think that this is actually a good opportunity, right, to finance something. You have to change the mindset of how you think of it as a salesperson. This is a proactive development and mindset that you have to take as being on the sales side before you get too far down the path with your customer. And what I mean by that is before you get they ask you for, let's say, a budgetary quote. You want to be thinking about this. You want to have looked at your pipeline. You want to analyze the install base. You want to understand where it could potentially be a good fit for a specific customer, and think of financing. And that's where you really want to engage with a company like ours, with Tony or myself and our team, to say, you know what? Let's just have a conversation around this. Let me see and explore if this could make sense. We can run through scenarios with you. We can model opportunities. We can play around with payments, because as you put something out to the customer in a base plus option structure, you get that conversation going with them. And then again, we'll speak a little bit more to that in the second series. But again, this is a very proactive sales approach that you take by evaluating your pipeline, engaging with us early in the process. And then before that budgetary quote goes out, you have thought through a lot of this, and have kind of accounted for what the economics of the deal would look like. You probably have a good understanding of what the customer price might need to be based upon prior contracts. And maybe, we've got our annual uplifts that take place. And so you've got to account for that. But you also have to account for your channel partners, making sure that you're accounting for distribution revenue. And so while we can model these out very quickly, it sounds a little more complicated than it actually is. We can turn models around within 24 hours, sometimes within a couple of hours, just depending on what we have on our plate. But it's really important that you're thinking about it before that budgetary quote goes in. And the reason why I say that is that if you do have a customer asking for a budgetary quote, I think the quick move for many of us is to go and try to get pricing for a 1-year deal. And that's where I say you've got to hold back on that, because once you submit that 1-year quote to your customer, you run the risk of that getting submitted with the requisition package and it getting, put into procurement not the way that you potentially want or intend it to. And so you've got to be thinking about that base plus option structure very early in the sales cycle. You go to the next slide there, Tony. And so these are instances, first and foremost, though, let me back up for 1 second. First and foremost, this has to benefit you, right? This has to benefit you as a salesperson. It has to benefit your company when you're creating these base plus option payments. The idea is that the government is going to have increased benefit because there's a discount that might be extended from the OEM for structuring a larger multi-year deal. And so benefit there to the government, benefit to the OEM, and then the channel can benefit from this structure as well, because when you finance, we pull that all forward. And who doesn't want a bigger deal, right? These are often the instances that we see financing leveraged. It's usually around a budget shortfall, right? Maybe the customer's been using the products and they have a requirement for additional capabilities, or maybe they need a tech refresh, but they haven't budgeted for it. That's a good opportunity to pick up the phone and call us and say, customer doesn't have the budget. What can we help potentially to structure? CR is another one, right? We're in the middle of a CR. It happens every year. How can we potentially leverage a CR, or leverage financing rather, in the middle of a CR to potentially get a transaction done? Those are a little bit more difficult. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in our next series, but there are solutions potentially to those opportunities that we can work through. Also, enterprise license agreements. Maybe there's additional functionality, or they want to consolidate different license types, and under an enterprise license agreement, what does that look like for a consolidation, right? Making this deal bigger and then extending it out over time, where the government is going to benefit from, maybe flat payments or something along those lines instead of those annual increases. And then also license modernization. We still see some procurement licenses that are out there, and maybe we're moving more to a subscription type. And sometimes that's a little hard pill for a customer to swallow, because they're in sustainment mode of like paying maintenance on an already owned asset of a perpetual license. So we can help ease into those subscriptions because they're going to be a little bit more expensive. And then also as a service, as a service is all the buzz, right? It's device as a service, it's laptops as a service, it's storage as a service, networking as a service. A lot of the manufacturers that we work with might not actually have a package to support an as a service type model. But insert financing, we could structure it as such where it looks like an as a service to the customer, but on the back end, what's really happening is financing, and then we can purchase everything up front and then spread out those costs to the customer. And the payments don't have to be annual, although they often are. Sometimes they can be quarterly, semi-annual, or even monthly, especially when you're looking at an as-a-service model. Sometimes you can even change the color of money, right? So get away from the capital expenditures and flip that to an operational expenditure, and leverage the different buckets of money that are available. And then last but not least, like license compliance. So sometimes the government customers are overusing and they didn't budget for overusage. And so how do we structure a flexible payment option that pays for that compliance issue over a period of time? You jump ahead there, Tony, to the next slide for me. And so we put together a couple of use cases here just to share. I'm a visual person. Hopefully some of you on the phone here are, looking at a couple different types of scenarios where financing has been leveraged. The first use case we're going to look at is really around a reinstatement and then a 3-year subscription license. The second one is around an existing customer contract that we had, but there was increased requirements by the customer and how we kind of handled that. So the first use case is around a subscription with a specific manufacturer that we were working with. Customer was paying about $630,000 a year. Somehow their licenses lapsed. The money was swept and they ran into a challenge where they needed to quickly find a way to get the licenses back up and running, but there was a reinstatement fee that the manufacturer was imposing. And so, of course, they didn't budget for that. And so insert 4Inc there, we were able to structure it where we took that reinstatement fee and we spread it out while we paid the manufacturer upfront for that, or the channel partner paid upfront for that. We were allowed the customer to kind of not really feel that reinstatement because we were able to spread that cost out over the length of the base plus options contract. And so what happened was the manufacturer got a win because they were able to have a bigger deal, and the sales rep saw, instead of a $630,000 deal, it turned into a $2 million deal. And so the customer got what they needed, OEM got what they needed, the channel benefited, and everybody was happy. created a bigger opportunity and deal for everyone. And the second scenario we're going to show you here was around a DISA customer. And the DISA customer, can you forward, Tony? The DISA customer, sorry, we might be frozen, or is that me?
Nikki, can you see it?
I can't. It froze. But assuming everyone else can see it, there we go. The DISA customer was in an existing contract. It was a 5-year long base plus 4 options. And they really had a requirement for net new capabilities, or not net new, but it was additional capabilities and functionality within various programs in the agency. And so they called us and said, what can we do here? What can we structure to get those capabilities? And in the 4th year of the contract, we decided to end that, build out a net new base plus 4 option year contract that spread out the cost of the new capability that they needed, and also, again, created another large revenue event for the OEM. And so there was cost savings. There was through discounting that the government was able to get into their net new requirement, and then also being able to, everybody in the channel benefit from a larger opportunity. At the 11th hour in this specific transaction, the government actually came back to us and said, because it was actually an ELA, ESA that we were doing, an enterprise license plus enterprise support. And the support had traditionally been paid upfront at the annual renewal. But in this instance, the customer came back to us right around the time of award and said, we really want to be able to pay for that support in arrears. And so they didn't want to pay for it up front. And so in that 11th hour, we were able to quickly pull together a flexible option that let them pay us in arrears, but we still purchase that enterprise support upfront from the customer. And so it was a last minute, sometimes these things can blow up deals so that they don't end up happening. But in this instance, we were able to structure it where we could still get the deal done. Customer was happy, manufacturer was happy, everybody in the channel was happy. And so it was a really big win-win for everybody involved. Very large contract. So can you jump ahead there, Tony?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to you actually here.
Yes, sure. So one of the things that we get asked most often is, does the government actually do this? Can they do it? Is it legal? Is it something that is exercised a lot? And the answer is absolutely yes, but there is some confusion around terminology, right? You'll hear leasing, you'll hear financing, you'll hear payment plans. All of these terms are used interchangeably. And the reason for that, if we do a quick look back at through history. So, going back 10 years or more, there was leasing of equipment that was done through GSA schedules under a special item number. And at that time, that structure was very complicated in that there was pages of terms and conditions that were negotiated with GSA on behalf of the agencies. There was regulation coming out from GAO on how these structures or leases had to be scored or accounted for. And it caused a lot of problems and left a very bad taste in the mouths of contracting officers who just were like, we don't want to lease, right? So this industry has evolved over time from offering leasing structures to what we're now referring to as payment plans, right? So in the vernacular, when you're talking with government agencies, you wouldn't introduce a lease or very rare occasions where you would, if there's hardware involved, sometimes they do like to call it a lease. But generally speaking, the way that these are presented to the government agency are as these base plus option year payment plans. And what has formerly been pages and pages of terms and conditions has now evolved into 5 FAR clauses and a couple supplemental terms and conditions that we work with you to get into the orders that allow us to pull forward all the future years, pay everybody up front, and then bill the government for the option years in the future. It's important to know that it is a structure that is used. I think we talked earlier about government spending over $100 billion a year. They do probably less than 5% of that gets financed, but it does get financed, right? So if we're introducing these and providing all the right information up front, then it's a completely legal, moral, ethical, and way for the contracting office to conduct business. And we can also offer experience and instances and examples of where it's been used, and have a feel for what the agency's appetite is for putting structures together and what kind of terms and conditions they'll collect. So when someone asks you if they finance, the answer is yes. It's just making sure that it's presented properly up front so that you can maximize the opportunity and become that trusted advisor that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah, just to reiterate on that, Tony, if I can, like a lot of times we'll have sales reps that say to us, and I might have said this earlier about, their customers don't finance. And to that, I would agree with Tony there that it's really, this is a sales tool in terms of helping customers overcome some of these challenges that they have. They're not always aware that it's getting financed. And that is, we kind of remove through the process, remove some of that red tape and the wool that is in the middle, to present them with a flexible option that, again, FAR compliant, everything is above board, but it doesn't scream this is getting financing. The financing really takes place on the back end between distribution, OEM, and channel partner with your finance company. That's really where the rubber hits the road. And so you're not technically walking into your customer and saying, hey, do you want to finance? Leasing and finance can have a little bit, because of the reasons Tony just mentioned, a little bit of a negative view because of some of the history of leasing and financing. Unless the customer is asking for it, you don't bring it up, right? In leasing and financing, you just say, you know what, I might be able to come up with a creative structure that helps you get and acquire the net new requirements that you have, but the ability to pay out over time without obligation. Let me get back to you. And then you engage with a company like ours, and we can sit down and talk about what that strategy looks like in more detail. I just wanted to mention that because, again, this sales tool can be so powerful. Well, everybody wins, but you as the salesperson are in that kind of lead role of being able to introduce it in a creative way that helps get all of this in motion. And so be thinking about that very early in the
Yeah, that's a great
process.
point, Nikki, because I think that that component of it is what adds some of the confusion to the process for the channel, right? So you almost have to think about any finance deal in two tracks, right? There's the government award to the prime contractor, and from the government's perspective, it's just a payment plan. It's a FAR compliant payment plan that's in an award to a prime contractor. And then what's happening sort of behind the curtains is FOR is working with that prime to buy those contract payments, and all of the financing elements are done between those two entities. So they are separate, but related, if that makes sense.
And so why would you work with a company like FOR? Tony and I got to talk a few minutes at the beginning about our experience and our background, but our entire organization is very rich in knowledge, experience, and everybody has kind of been in the seats that you guys are in, whether you're selling directly to an end user from an OEM or from a reseller or at the distribution side. We get all those complexities. We understand it. While we are a public sector IT distributor, we've specialized in federal for a really long time. And so we understand, the complexities of procurement. Because we hold contracts, we often get to have a lot of that engagement and with the procurement officials directly. So we fully have an appreciation for how to get these deals done and how to work through procurement. Because when you're with the end user and the customer is saying, yes, I want to do this, once it gets to procurement, that's really where the rubber hits the road, and where you have to have an experienced partner in there helping you navigate through those waters, because there are some terms and conditions that go along with this. It's a base plus option structure, but then there's a paragraph of terms and conditions that have to be included in there. And there's an ability to finesse those and kind of tweak them along the process, but you've got to make sure you're aligned to the right partner. And so the knowledge and experience our guys bring, I think, is just the greatest in the industry. We're not just bankers sitting behind and crunching numbers and running models. We've lived this, we've been in those seats with you, and we have a lot of compassion and understanding for sensitivities around end of month, end of quarter, end of fiscal year, and to how to quickly navigate those waters and help everybody there to be successful. The other piece of it is, and I mentioned this just a little bit, but the evolution of a deal. You can have something that is, you're in selling to the end user, they're shaking their head. And again, it gets to procurement and there starts to get some hair to it. Again, we can help navigate through those waters. And then also a partner who has breadth and depth of funding options. So whereas Tony had come from Key Bank, it was a regulated bank. There was so much that they can do and so much that they couldn't do. On the 4Inc side, we are a broker. We've got a lot of partners that sit behind us in the way of financiers that we can tap into. Some of them like long duration deals that are like 5 years, we talk 60 months. And then others like the 36-month spot, which tends to be really sweet for technology just because of how fast and ever changing this environment is. And then we have some lenders that like federal deals, some that like the SLED deals, small dollar amount and to the very large dollar amount. And so we have, we come in and we profile the deal with you. We understand all the specifics of it. And then we have, lenders behind us that we feel like this could be a good placement for. And so making sure that you have a partner that has that breadth and depth, I think is an incredibly important, because at the end of the day, we are trying to get you to, you're rolling up your numbers, right, to your management, and your management is rolling that up to the leadership or the C-level suites within your organization. And you're going to be held accountable to delivering and making sure those deals close. And so being aligned with the right partner like 4Inc, we can help you get to the certainty of that outcome of getting your deal done. It's much bigger in size and you look like a hero and everybody's wondering how you did it. And so aligning with us, we can help you through all facets of it. And to that, I think I'm wrapping up here. We're going to go to slide 16, Tony, of just talking about this series a little bit more.
Yeah, so we touched on sort of the topics that we're going to cover, and I think in summary for today is we sort of challenge you to take a look at your pipelines and start to think about some of the things we talked about. Obviously, there's a million ways and a million opportunities to try to change something or flip something from an annual order into a multi-year option. But there's also a wide array of solutions that you can offer if there's budget problems or a whole host of reasons. So again, we would ask that you start to think about this, and if you have opportunities or potential opportunities that you want to start to talk about, please engage us early and let us help you sort of frame them out and see if there's something that's there to bring forward as a financing opportunity. And then we have our second session scheduled for February 26th, and we'll start to go into much more detail how we're going to go after or introduce the concept into your customers. And then for the third and fourth session, the dates are yet to be determined, but we'll keep everybody posted and make sure that we send those links out when they become available. So with that, we'd like to open it up to questions that you may have. I think submit them in the question mark, Nikki. Is that right?
Yeah. If there are no questions, we also, if you can go to the next slide, Tony, there is some contact information here if you'd like to take a picture of this, or we will be sending out the recording of this webinar. You can reach out to us individually. Tony and myself specifically. Joe also works with us on the finance team. Any one of the three of us can help you to kind of frame this out, have a discussion, and no conversation is silly. I want to be very clear here. Financing, if you're not accustomed to doing it, you might want a little bit more hand-holding, and that is absolutely something that we can provide to help walk you through the process, because I guarantee once you get a hang of it, this is something that you're going to be able to leverage throughout the duration of your career if you're not already using it. So welcome those phone calls, welcome those emails. There is a question that popped up here, Tony.
So Nikki, I can't see the.
Okay. Will you ever do, whoops, it disappeared on me. Hold on one second. Will you ever do financing if the government customer hasn't committed to option years, but there is high likelihood of renewals, or are option years required? That's a great question. So option years are required to be part of the contract. And because we are buying a stream of payments, that's why I said it's really important when you go back and you're submitting that budgetary quote, you're selling the customer on the value of doing the option years. And so definitely have to have the option years attached to it to be able to finance.
And again, they can't, I mean, they're exactly that, right? We talked about the intent, but not the obligation to renew. So most agencies won't know for sure if they're going to get their budgets. But the type of things that we're looking to finance are need to be mission critical, highly essential solutions, right? So, and they have to match the government need, right? So if the government only needs a solution for 2 years, we're not going to price out a 5-year option because they shouldn't enjoy the benefit of a 5-year deal if their intent is only for 2, right? So it's very important for us in the early stages of the deal to understand the need and align it properly with the contract that we put together for them.
And if you're working with a system integrator, I think it's important to note that the system integrator has a contract that they are working or operating off of from the government customer. And we've got to make sure that if we are going to finance a deal that the system integrator is behind, that we line up with the duration of that contract. Obviously, we can't go beyond the period of performance of the integrator's contract, but we do work with integrators. So there's a few out there that we've done a lot of this with successfully, and so welcome those conversations and calls as well. Any additional questions? Again, appreciate you guys so much for participating with us today. If you do have questions, feel free to reach out to us individually. Welcome those calls and start thinking about this as a potential tool and opportunity to make your deals bigger and help accomplish mission for your government customers. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for participating.
Thanks, everybody.